So just an introduction, Larry Brilliant is a physician who actually spent his career actually eradicating smallpox and was the person who identified the last case of smallpox in the world. Okay. So he did this TED Talk in 2006. I want you to remember he did this TED Talk in 2006. Okay. He is actually going to actually talk about, Haywood, just go on mute for just a second. He's going to talk about his work, and he's going to also, he's going to talk about his work, and he's also going to talk about predicting the future. And he's going to also talk about what is it that we need to do and come together as a people to actually stop pandemics. Okay. This is the best talk on this subject. All right, let's again, 2006. Here you go. Let's get this started.
I'm the luckiest guy in the world.
Can people hear? Can you hear?
The last case of killer smallpox in the world. I was in India this past year, and I may have seen the last cases of polio in the world.
Can people hear? No.
There's nothing that makes you feel
I can't hear, so I know everybody else can't hear. Hold on just a second.
Yes.
I can hear it, yes.
Oh, you can? Okay, okay, all right, okay.
I can hear.
Okay, great. All right, go ahead and go back on mute. Thank you.
I'm the luckiest guy in the world. I got to see the last case of killer smallpox in the world. I was in India this past year, and I may have seen the last cases of polio in the world. There's nothing that makes you feel more the blessing and the honor of working in a program like that than to know that something that horrible no longer exists. So I'm going to show you some dirty pictures. They are difficult to watch, but you should look at them with optimism, because the horror of these pictures will be matched by the uplifting quality of knowing that they no longer exist. But first, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my own journey. My background is not exactly the conventional medical education that you might expect. When I was an intern in San Francisco, I heard about a group of Native Americans who had taken over Alcatraz Island, and a Native American who wanted to give birth on that island, and no other doctor wanted to go and help her give birth. I went out to Alcatraz and I lived on the island for several weeks. She gave birth, I caught the baby, I got off the island, I landed in San Francisco, and all the press wanted to talk to me because my 3 weeks on the island made me an expert in Indian affairs. I wound up on every television show. Someone saw me on television, they called me up and they asked me if I'd like to be in the movie and to play a young doctor for a bunch of rock and roll stars who were traveling in a bus ride from San Francisco to England. And I said, yes, I would do that. So I became the doctor in an absolutely awful movie called Medicine Ball Caravan. Now, you know, from the 60s, you're either on the bus or you're off the bus. I was on the bus. My wife and I, of 37 years, joined the bus. Our bus ride took us from San Francisco to London. We switched buses at the Big Pond. We then got on 2 more buses, and we drove through Turkey and Iran, Afghanistan, over the Khyber Pass into Pakistan. Like every other young doctor, this is us at the Khyber Pass, and that's our bus. We had some difficulty getting over the Khyber Pass, but we wound up in India. And then, like everyone else in our generation, we went to live in a Himalayan monastery. This is just like a residency program for those of you that are in medical school. And we studied with a wise man, our guru named Karoli Baba, who then told me to get rid of the dress, put on a 3-piece suit, go join the United Nations as a diplomat, and work for the World Health Organization. And he made an outrageous prediction that smallpox would be eradicated, and this was God's gift to humanity because of the hard work of dedicated scientists. And that prediction came true. And this little girl is Rahima Banu, and she was the last case of killer smallpox in the world. And this document is the certificate that the Global Commission signed certifying the world to have eradicated the first disease in history. The key to eradicating smallpox was early detection, early response. I'm going to ask you to repeat that. Early detection, early response. Can you say that? Early detection, early response. Smallpox was the worst disease in history. It killed more people than all the wars in history. In the last century, it killed 500 million people. More than you're reading about Larry Page already. Somebody reads very fast. In the year that Larry Page and Sergey Brin, with whom I have a certain affection and a new affiliation, in the year in which they were born, 2 million people died of smallpox. We declared smallpox eradicated in 1980. This is the most important slide that I've ever seen in public health, because it shows you to be the richest and the strongest and to be kings and queens of the world did not protect you from dying of smallpox. Never can you doubt that we are all in this together. But to see smallpox from the perspective of a sovereign is the wrong perspective. You should see it from the perspective of a mother watching her child develop this disease and standing by helplessly. Day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6. You're a mother and you're watching your child, and on day 6, you see pustules that become hard. Day 7, they show the classic scars of smallpox umbilication. Day 8. And Al Gore said earlier that the most photographed image in the world, the most printed image in the world, was that of the Earth. But this was in 1974, and as of that moment, this photograph was the photograph that was the most widely printed, because we printed 2 billion copies of this photograph, and we took them hand to hand, door to door, to show people and ask them if there was smallpox in their house, because that was our surveillance system. We didn't have Google. We didn't have web crawlers. We didn't have computers. By day 9, you look at this picture and you're horrified. I look at this picture and I say, thank God, because it's clear that this is only an ordinary case of smallpox, and I know this child will live. And by day 13, the lesions are scabbing, his eyelids are swollen, but you know this child has no other secondary infection. And by day 20, while he will be scarred for life, he will live. There are other kinds of smallpox that are not like that. This is confluent smallpox, in which there isn't a single place on the body where you could put a finger and not be covered by lesions. Flat smallpox, which killed 100% of people who got it. And hemorrhagic smallpox, the most cruel of all, which had a predilection for pregnant women. I've probably had 50 women die. They all had hemorrhagic smallpox. I've never seen anybody die from it who wasn't a pregnant woman. In 1967, the WHO embarked on what was an outrageous program to eradicate a disease. In that year, there were 34 countries affected with smallpox. By 1970, we were down to 18 countries. In 1974, we were down to 5 countries. But in that year, smallpox exploded throughout India. And India was the place where smallpox made its last stand. In 1974, India had a population of 600 million. There are 21 linguistic states in India, which is like saying 21 different countries. There are 20 million people on the road at any time, in buses and trains, walking, 500,000 villages, 120 million households, and none of them wanted to report if they had a case of smallpox in their house, because they thought that smallpox was the visitation of a deity, Shitalama, the cooling mother, and it was wrong to bring strangers into your house when the deity was in the house. No incentive to report smallpox. It wasn't just India that had smallpox deities. Smallpox deities were prevalent all over the world. So how we eradicated smallpox was max vaccination wouldn't work. You could vaccinate everybody in India, but 1 year later there'd be 21 million new babies, which was then the population of Canada. It wouldn't do just to vaccinate everyone. You need to find every single case of smallpox in the world at the same time and draw a circle of immunity around it. And that's what we did. In India alone, my 150,000 best friends and I went door to door with that same picture to every single house in India. We made over 1 billion house calls. And in the process, I learned something very important. Every time we did a house-to-house search, we had a spike in the number of reports of smallpox. When we didn't search, we had the illusion that there was no disease. When we did search, we had the illusion that there was more disease. A surveillance system was necessary because what we needed was early detection, early response. So we searched, and we searched, and we found every case of smallpox in India. We had a reward. We raised the reward. We continued to increase the reward. We had a scorecard that we wrote on every house. And as we did that, the number of reported cases in the world dropped to 0. And in 1980, we declared the globe free of smallpox. It was the largest campaign in United Nations history until the Iraq War. 150,000 people from all over the world, doctors of every race, religion, culture, and nation, who fought side by side, brothers and sisters, with each other, not against each other, in a common cause to make the world better. But smallpox was the 4th disease that was intended for eradication. We failed 3 other times. We failed against malaria, yellow fever, and yaws. But soon, we may see polio eradicated. But the key to eradicating polio is early detection, early response. This may be the year we eradicate polio. That will make it the 2nd disease in history. And David Heyman, who's watching this on the webcast, David, keep on going. We're close. We're down to 4 countries. I feel like Hank Aaron, Barry Bonds can replace me any time. Let's get another disease off the list of terrible things to worry about. I was just in India working on the polio program. The polio surveillance program is 4 million people going door to door. That is the surveillance system. But we need to have early detection, early response. Blindness, the same thing. The key to discovering blindness is doing epidemiological surveys and finding out the causes of blindness so you can mount the correct response. The SEVA Foundation was started by a group of alumni of the smallpox eradication program who, having climbed the highest mountain, tasted the elixir of the success of eradicating a disease, wanted to do it again. And over the last 27 years, SEVA's programs in 15 countries have given back sight to more than 2 million blind people. SEVA got started because we wanted to apply these lessons of surveillance and epidemiology to something which nobody else was looking at as a public health issue, blindness, which heretofore had been thought of only as a clinical disease. In 1980, Steve Jobs gave me that computer, which is Apple number 12, and it's still in Kathmandu, and it's still working, and we ought to go get it and auction it off and make more money for SEVA. And we conducted the first Nepal survey ever done for health and the first nationwide blindness survey ever done, and we had astonishing results. Instead of finding out what we thought was the case, that blindness was caused mostly by glaucoma and trachoma, we were astounded to find out that blindness was caused instead by cataract. You can't cure or prevent what you don't know is there. In your TED packages, there's a DVD, Infinite Vision, about Dr. V and the Aravind Eye Hospital. I hope that you will take a look at it. Aravind, which started as a SEVA project, is now the world's largest and best eye hospital. This year, that one hospital will give back sight to more than 300,000 people in Tamil Nadu, India. Bird flu, I stand here as a representative of all terrible things. This might be the worst. The key to preventing or mitigating pandemic bird flu is early detection and rapid response. We will not have a vaccine or adequate supplies of an antiviral to combat bird flu if it occurs in the next 3 years. WHO stages the progress of a pandemic. We are now at stage 3 on the pandemic alert stage, with just a little bit of human-to-human transmission, but no human-to-human-to-human sustained transmission. The moment WHO says we've moved to Category 4, this will not be like Katrina. The world as we know it will stop. There'll be no airplanes flying. Would you get in an airplane with 250 people you didn't know coughing and sneezing when you knew that some of them might carry a disease that could kill you, for which you had no antivirals or vaccine? I did a study of the top epidemiologists in the world in October. I asked them, these are all fluologists and specialists in influenza, and I asked them the questions you'd like to ask them. What do you think the likelihood is that there'll be a pandemic? If it happens, how bad do you think it'll be? 15% said they thought there'd be a pandemic within 3 years, but much worse than that, 90% said they thought there'd be a pandemic within your children or your grandchildren's lifetime. And they thought that if there was a pandemic, 1 billion people would get sick. As many as 165 million people would die. There would be a global recession and depression as our just-in-time inventory system and the tight rubber band of globalization broke, and the cost to our economy of $1 to $3 trillion would be far worse for everyone than merely 100 million people dying, because so many more people would lose their job and their health care benefits that the consequences are almost unthinkable. And it's getting worse because travel is getting so much better. Let me show you a simulation of what a pandemic looks like so we know what we're talking about. Let's assume, for example, that the first case occurs in South Asia. It initially goes quite slowly. You get 2 or 3 discrete locations. Then there'll be secondary outbreaks. And the disease will spread from country to country so fast that you won't know what hit you. Within 3 weeks, it will be everywhere in the world. Now, if we had an undo button, and we could go back and isolate it and grab it when it first started, if we could find it early and we had early detection and early response, and we could put each one of those viruses in jail, that's the only way to deal with something like a pandemic. And let me show you why that is. We have a joke. This is an epidemic curve, and everyone in medicine, I think, ultimately gets to know what it is. But the joke is an epidemiologist likes to arrive at an epidemic right here and ride to glory on the downhill curve. But you don't get to do that usually. You usually arrive right about here. What we really want is to arrive right here so we can stop the epidemic. But you can't always do that. But there's an organization that has been able to find a way to learn when the first cases occur, and that is called GPHIN. It's the Global Public Health Information Network. And that simulation that I showed you that you thought was bird flu, that was SARS. And SARS is the pandemic that did not occur. And it didn't occur because GPHIN found the epidemic of the pandemic to be of SARS 3 months before WHO actually announced it. And because of that, we were able to stop the SARS pandemic. And I think we owe a great debt of gratitude to GPHIN and to Ron St. John, who I hope is in the audience someplace, over there, who's the founder of GPHIN. Hello, Ron. And Ted has flown Ron here from Ottawa, where GPHIN is located, because not only did GPHIN find SARS early, but you may have seen last week that Iran announced that they had bird flu in Iran. But GPHIN found the bird flu in Iran, not February 14th, but last September. We need an early warning system to protect us against the things that are humanity's worst nightmare. And so my TED Wish is based on the common denominator of these experiences: smallpox, early detection, early response; blindness, polio, early detection, early response; pandemic bird flu, early detection, early response. It is a litany. It is so obvious that our only way of dealing with these new diseases is to find them early and to kill them before they spread. So my TED Wish is for you to help build a global system, an early warning system, to protect us against humanity's worst nightmares. And what I thought I would call it is early detection. But it should really be called total early detection. What? What? But in all seriousness, because this idea is birthed in TED, I would like it to be a legacy of TED, and I'd like to call it the International System for Total Early Disease Detection. And instead then becomes our mantra. So instead of a hidden pandemic of bird flu, we find it and immediately contain it. Instead of a novel virus caused by bioterror or bioerror or shift or drift, we find it and we contain it. Instead of industrial accidents like oil spills or the catastrophe in Bhopal, we find them and we respond to them. Instead of famine, hidden until it is too late, we detect it and we respond. And instead of a system which is owned by a government and hidden in the bowels of government, let's build an early detection system that's freely available to anyone in the world in their own language. Let's make it transparent, non-governmental, not owned by any single country or company, housed in a neutral country with redundant backup in a different time zone and a different continent. And let's build it on GFIN. Let's start with GFIN. Let's increase the websites that they crawl from 20,000 to 20 million. Let's increase the languages they crawl from 7 to 70 or more. Let's build in outbound confirmation messages using text messages or SMS or instant messaging to find out from people who are within 100 meters of the rumor that you hear if it is in fact valid. And let's add satellite confirmation, and we'll add Gapminder's amazing graphics to the front end, and we'll grow it as a moral force in the world, finding out those terrible things before anybody else knows about them and sending our response to them. So that next year, instead of us meeting here lamenting how many terrible things there are in the world, we will have pulled together, used the unique skills and the magic of this community, and be proud that we have done everything we can to stop pandemics, other catastrophes, and change the world beginning right now.
That's incredible. We're going to wait up. We need to talk. So, an amazing presentation. First of all, just so everyone understands, you were saying that by creating web crawlers, looking on the internet for patterns, they can detect something suspicious before WHO, before anyone else can see it. Just explain, give an example of how that could possibly be true.
First of all, you're not mad about the copyright violation?
No, I love it.
Well, you know, as Ron St. John, I hope you'll go and meet him in the dinner afterwards and talk to him. When he started GFIN, in 1997 there was an outbreak of bird flu, H5N1. It was in Hong Kong. And a remarkable doctor in Hong Kong responded immediately by slaughtering 1.5 million chickens and birds, and they stopped that outbreak in its tracks. Immediate detection, immediate response. Then a number of years went by, and there were a lot of rumors about bird flu. Ron and his team in Ottawa began to crawl the web, only crawling 20,000 different websites, mostly periodicals, and they read about and heard about a concern of a lot of children who had high fever and symptoms of bird flu. They reported this to WHO. WHO took a little while taking action because WHO will only receive a report from a government because it's the United Nations. But they were able to point to WHO and let them know that there was this surprising and unexplained cluster of illnesses that looked like bird flu. That turned out to be SARS. That's how the world found out about SARS. And because of that, we were able to stop SARS. Now, what's really important is that before there was GFIN, 100% of all the world's reports of bad things, whether you're talking about famine or you're talking about bird flu or you're talking about Ebola, 100% of all those reports came from nations. The moment these guys in Ottawa, on a budget of $800,000 a year, got cracking, 75% of all the reports in the world came from GFIN, 25% of all the reports in the world came from all the other 180 nations. Now, here's what's real interesting. After they'd been working for a couple years, what do you think happened to those nations? They felt pretty stupid. So they started sending in their reports early, and now their reporting percentage is down to 50% because other nations have started to report. So can you find diseases early by crawling the web? Of course you can. Can you find them even earlier than GFIN does now? Of course you can. You saw that they found SARS using their Chinese web crawler a full 6 weeks before they found it using their English web crawler. Well, they're only crawling in 7 languages. These bad viruses really don't have any intention of showing up first in English or Spanish or French. So, yes, I want to take GFIN, I want to build on it, I want to add all the languages of the world that we possibly can. I want to make this open to everybody so that the health officer in Nairobi or in Patna, Bihar, will have as much access to it as the folks in Ottawa or in CDC. And I want to make it part of our culture that there is a community of people who are watching out for the worst nightmares of humanity and that it's accessible to everyone.
Okay, let's hear some comments about that. It was a long video. It was a lot of different things. It probably was a different perspective than what you've heard before. As we've said before, SARS and bird flu were also coronaviruses. Charles, I'm going to take you off of mute. Hold on a second. Go ahead. But I think it's really interesting and important that this was 2006, and he actually predicted a pandemic that would shut down economies worldwide, which is what we're in right now. Go ahead, Dr. Charles.
Well, and I apologize, I got on the call late, but I heard a good portion of it. That was just an amazing talk, and so prophetic in so many ways to what we're going through right now.
Right. Yeah.
So.
And there really is a role for something that is outside of government that is an early detection system to all of us, yes. Right? And I think that that's what's really, really important. And essentially what he was talking about going door to door is he was just talking about contact tracing, right? But because they were in India and there were no phones, et cetera, he's talking about, just going door to door. Yeah, so I see some comments in the chat box like, wow, imagine if we had actually had early detection, early response, right? We would not necessarily be in this sort of situation. So feel free to raise your hand or put something in the chat box or put something in the Q&A if you had a particular comment about this. But I think his name is Larry Brilliant. So if you ever want to watch it again, you can just go to TEDx and put in the name Larry Brilliant, like be brilliant. It's all about how to, the video is called Help Me Eradicate Pandemics. And the organization that he's talking about, which is the Global Health Information Alliance Network, the GHIPN, is actually a Canadian organization. It is a non-governmental nonprofit. And they spend their time, like I said, crawling. I'm sure they're probably also using drones and everything else now. Feel free to raise your hand or ask a question or put a question in the chat box. But I wanted people to kind of see, there's been so much about what we're in the middle of. I wanted people to see, like, this is actually what's possible. Did GFNN find COVID-19 before the CDC and World Health Organization published its existence? Very good question. You know what, I am going to just really quickly do a quick search and see what they had on GP. It's actually, and just so that everybody's clear, I'm going to put the name, let me put the name of the organization in the chat so we have it correctly. It's GPHIN, which is for, let's see here. And it looks like it has been working with the Canadian government. I don't know if it's public, but I'm going to write it out here. Okay, all right. So that is actually the organization. Let me just see what they, but I know for myself at least, I know I was seeing information in January on COVID. So I'm sure you could see stuff before January, because we have since gone back in the United States and we have looked at our own data around clinic visits and hospital visits for respiratory symptoms. And we have found an increase as early as December or January. So we just monitored our own data. We would have known something was going on in December and January. So anyhow, I will I'm putting that in the chat to see what they're actually saying around the detection of COVID from that organization. So any other questions or anything else in the Q&A? Or anybody want to raise their hand? I did want to comment on the book that was mentioned, and, you know, could we actually have a pandemic that led to the loss of life of billions of people? And so I wanted to point out, the other reason why I wanted people to see this particular video is to see that smallpox did kill 500 million people in the 20th century. So Alana, go ahead. You can come on off mute. You can take yourself off mute, Alana. Alana, can you take yourself off of mute? You had your hand raised. There you go.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
You're still cutting off and on.
I am? You're saying you can't hear me? Alana?
Yes.
Okay.
A few words are, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear
Yes.
you. Yeah. All righty. All right. Put your message in
You're
chat.
cutting off and on.
Okay. All right. Okay, great. Okay, I'm going to put you on mute. Can you put in the chat if you're hearing me properly, and if you're not? Alana, I'm not sure if it's on your end or on my end. I did just change the my webinar settings. Hold on just a second. Okie dokie. All righty. All right. I changed some of the settings to see if that would actually work. Okay. Here's a question. Is it possible for COVID to mutate and morph? so yeah, okay, let me answer that. If not contained in the next few years, thereby creating another pandemic. Okay, so a couple of things. So COVID-19 is a large droplet that when it actually separates into multiple smaller droplets actually can present as disease very differently, okay? So what we have noticed is that even from the time it came from China to here, that it's actually become increasingly infectious and more dangerous and more causing more deaths. We're not clear if it's an actual mutation. There is an article that I'm getting ready to actually write. One of the things that we have found is that the English language, because we have P, T, K, those are sounds that aerosolize the virus more. So it's going to take us a little while to figure out, is it that the disease is different or is it operating differently in an English-speaking country or in English-speaking countries? But certainly from the time of China to Europe to now, it has become increasingly dangerous. We are not really sure of its ability to mutate. However, it takes a lot of mutations for a virus to go from only being in animals to then jumping from animals to human, and then jumping to human transmission. So just the fact that it very quickly started going to human transmission tells me that I suspect that this virus has been mutating for a while, and what we're experiencing now is the latest mutation. But we don't know how fast is it going to mutate moving forward, right? Or if it is going to mutate moving forward. So yes, so that is the answer to that. And as you can see, once these things get out of control, it's much harder to put the cat back in the bag, right? It's much harder. The important thing is that you really need to have a robust public health surveillance system and contact tracing system. Okay, how quickly could COVID be eradicated in the world if the world were to take it seriously and attack it using whatever methods that are effective? I ask because I often see in news panel discussions where doctors say we're running out of time, but it's not too late to get the virus spread under control. Yeah. So what happens is, you know, we still could get the virus under control here in the United States. There is a sort of database tipping point at which things start to actually spread by wildfire. What's happening right now in the United States is that a lot of people are actually taking masks a lot more seriously now. And so again, remember, if we did the shutdown, I think the shutdown was like 2 months, we saved 60 million cases of COVID-19 in the United States by doing that shutdown. So as much as our lives were interrupted and it was a hassle, there's 60 million people in the United States, which is 20% of our population, that did not get COVID-19. So we do have an ability right now, in the United States, it's impacted about 7 million people. So we're now looking at maybe, 3% of the population has been infected by COVID-19. Certainly with that type of infection rate, you still have the ability to actually really control it. And so it will require, we're gonna have to do a lot of things before a vaccine gets here, including mask wearing and contact tracing and surveillance. So we are still able to do it. What types of blood types are more likely to have COVID-19, type O or type B? Actually, it's actually type A and AB. So A and AB are more likely to get COVID-19, and they're also more likely to not do well when they get the disease. So they are more likely to require mechanical ventilation and more likely to be in the ICU, and they're more likely to die. So that's blood type A and AB. Blood type B, it doesn't really seem like it doesn't really we're not seeing any more or less in B, but we are seeing in blood type O that is protective. And blood type O is less likely to get the disease, and they are also less likely to require ICU care, ventilation, and they're less likely to die. So that is what we're seeing around the blood type. So yeah, the blood type is very interesting data, and we don't really know why. It may be because of the proteins on the surface of the blood or that sort of thing. We don't really know exactly. We don't exactly know why. All righty. All right, any other questions or anybody want to raise their hands or ask any questions or any comments on anything? All righty. Giving you an opportunity and a chance to type. All right, here we go. Oh, okay, all right. How well is the phone tracing going? So I think that really depends upon what state you're in. So certain states, so there's one simple thing that the federal government could actually do, and I want to actually speak to that. They could actually require that the states and counties report how many contract tracers they have, and how many phone calls they're making or how many contacts they're making. That would be really, really important. As you notice, that information is not really provided. So we don't know which states are not doing contract tracing like they should. And I actually think that the federal government should link federal money to contract tracing. If you're not contract tracing and you're not doing the things that you should be doing, you don't get as much money, right? You have to be responsible in actually limiting the impact of this disease to get federal funds. I think that's one of the things that they really could be doing. Okay, is it possible for a family member to have COVID and not spread it to a newborn or a 4-month-old? You know, I would it depends. So if you're talking about a 2-parent household where one parent quarantines and the other person is COVID negative, then you could possibly not spread it to a newborn because the person who's COVID negative could then stay with the child, and then the one that's COVID positive could go into the basement. If you have both parents that are COVID positive and the child has not yet become COVID positive, and it's a child that is very young, that child needs to get, they need to make arrangements to get the child into somebody else's care. One of the things that we found in the pediatric Lancet study is that the children that did not do well are the children that were young, the children that were 1, 2, 3 months old. Those children did not do well. So I think it's really important if there's a very young child, 1 or 2 years old, not as much of an issue. Less than 6 months old, I'd make sure that the child was out of the house. At present, I do not see information about, okay, all right, I will send it out again. Let me see if I thought I put it out there to everybody. Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? All of my information has been going to panelists as opposed to everyone, so sorry about that. Hold on just a second. Let me retype that. And yes, it's GPHIN, GPH. And I'm not seeing yet what they did on COVID, so I will actually have to take a look at that. Global public, let me type it in. And they are a Canadian company, and they have a .ca website. Okay, so when you actually look at them, they have a .ca website. At present, okay, I do not see, please advise. Okay, all right, I just sent that in. All righty. All right, I got a hand up. Okie dokie. You can unmute, Dr. Charles.
Okay, I just wanted to just make one comment pertaining to what you were talking about regarding young children and particularly babies. In general, babies 6 months or less should not be exposed to a lot of people because their immune system is still young and is still being developed. So most of their immunity comes from the antibodies that they received from the mother during the time during the pregnancy. I really, really highly suggest that people do not expose their babies to a lot of the outside because they just don't have their immunity just not built up yet.
Yeah, and let me just also say, like, one of the things I wrote in my article for NBC was that when you're looking at whether or not to send an older child to school, if there is a child at home that is less than 6 months old, I would not send the older child to school, right? Because then that child will then be the vector for something coming back into the household. Right? So, thanks. Okay, we've got something else here in the chat. I am so grateful for these webinars, Dr. V. We are diligently trying to observe all the things you have shared and passing it on. You are welcome. You are welcome. You guys are the beacon of lights to go out there to everybody. I actually did a presentation today to Sisters Lead, Sisters Vote with, I don't know if any of you are in Texas, but I came right behind Eddie Bernice Johnson, who is a congresswoman out in Texas. And I did one of the earlier presentations, probably, you guys have advanced. So I did one of the earlier presentations that I did back in February and March, just a very, very basic presentation. And it was just very interesting because people were asking, where is this information? And obviously I told them about this site, but it's kind of like, why is it, we need to do more than hear about death counts. And we need to do more than hear about stimulus packages that may or may not be coming. We need to know what to do every day. We're making decisions every day about what to do with our lives, with weddings, funerals, upcoming Thanksgiving, Christmas, etc. So, what are some of the home remedies that we can use to prevent and care for ourselves during this time, or someone else in the home that has symptoms? Okay, so the main thing is zinc and vitamin D3, right? So the easiest way and best way to get vitamin D3 is to take a walk for 30 minutes at least 3 times a week. Okay, that is the easiest way. Now you can also, go to GNC and get vitamin D3 pills, but the easiest way is to go outside, take a walk in the sun, right? But in the wintertime, it may be a little bit more difficult because of the lack of sun. Zinc, you can look up the foods that have zinc. I think it's spinach and some other things, or you can actually take the supplementation. So zinc and vitamin D3 are the most important things you can do, in addition to actually getting a flu shot, which isn't a home remedy, but it's a standard. It's a really standard of care. But I would say zinc and vitamin D3. Exercise also really helps with increasing your immune system. Those are the things that you can. The other thing is no smoking, no vaping. I know during the quarantine, there's been, a lot of people were stressed. There was a lot more alcohol use. Drinking alcohol actually lowers your immune system. So there's certain things like that you can stop doing that would actually help. These are some of the things that would really make a really, really big difference. So yeah, I would say those are the most important things that you can actually do during this time period. When will myself or Dr. Charles be doing a TED Talk on COVID? Very, very interesting. So, it's funny. One of the things that I'm actually working on is I am working on a comedy show on COVID, talking about the life of an emergency medicine physician as this thing comes in and hits us, and all the things that have actually been occurring as a result of it. I think that we need some levity. And so I've actually been keeping notes throughout this whole thing. And I said, I'm going to have myself a little 10-minute and 20-minute routine to actually do on stage regarding COVID-19. All righty, let's see, what else do we have? All right. Let's see here. I saw a news article where the First Lady of the United States decided to take vitamins and supplements to combat her COVID-19 infection instead of the treatment that was administered to the president. What say you? Well, let me say, well, I've heard that both of them were taking vitamin D3 and zinc, both of them. So I don't know that she was taking anything different than him. He was also given vitamin D3 and zinc. And so I don't know of anything else that she was taking. There hasn't been as much information on her treatment plan. As you can see, like I said, men get this disease and do worse. So again, the whole family got it, and the man was the one that had to go to the hospital, right? Chris Christie actually just got discharged. He actually spent 7 days in the ICU. Chris Christie has a BMI over 40. So as you begin to see these things, you see them happening, and they're happening exactly like what we're talking about, right? So yeah, so I think that the treatment that she had was vitamin D3 and zinc, and I know that that's what he also had because they actually talked about it. But he had to have a lot of things in addition to that because his level of illness was so much more. He did have viral pneumonia. All right, Ron, I'm going to put your hand down because I think that was from earlier. If it's not, you can put it right back up. All righty. All right. Any other questions? Any other comments? All right, going once, going twice. All right. Well, listen, I want to thank all of you guys for coming this evening. Oh, okay. All right, hold on. Oh, okay, hold on. Somebody gave me the link to the, okay, I will actually check out this link. I will actually check out this link. Let me, the Russian Times is not one of my usual news sources, but I will check it out and tell you what I think, and let you know next time. Kevin, hold on. All right, Kevin, I've allowed you to talk. You can unmute. You can unmute yourself, Kevin.
Hey,
Yeah.
can you
Hey,
hear me?
how are you? Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. I'm just calling to say you look great, you know, through all this COVID and all this running and all this teaching and stuff. I'm just saying you look great.
Well,
Yeah.
I actually
I'm just calling to say thank you.
You're welcome. I actually started playing tennis 3 days a week. And today was one of my tennis days because I was looking at what sort of things I could actually do that were of low likelihood of transmission. And tennis was on the list. So tennis and golfing are very low. So I started doing it 3 days a week because I was also getting a little stir crazy in here, being all cooped up. All right. So yeah, okay. So I will actually read this Russian Times news article. So, but again, vitamins and healthy food, you can actually get zinc. Zinc. If you have zinc in your diet, you have a healthier diet by definition. I mean, when you talk about that the first lady actually has a healthier diet, I mean, they talk about the president always eating Doritos or something. So I mean, you know, so yes, any diet that's going to be high in zinc will be a healthy diet. So I'm sure it was geared around zinc and vitamin D3 because those are the things that have actually been shown to really be the most important thing. But I will read the whole article and I will get back to you on next week. So I took a screenshot of the link to the article and I will read it when I get off of here. So, All righty. I want to thank everybody for coming today. We will start again on Tuesday. Who knows what will have happened between now and Tuesday on COVID-19. If you have any questions that you want me to answer, I do have the questions from before about alpha interferon and the average cost of a healthcare stay. And I have I email out to an attorney to discuss liability. So we have those sorts of things upcoming. Feel free to invite any friends and family. You can just forward on the link or send them to the website so they can download the link themselves. And I will talk to you next Tuesday. And I'm glad you all enjoyed the video and the TED Talk. Thank you very much.